You're listening to Biz-Souls, the business podcast with an edge, hosted by me, Rona Lewis, and Jeffrey Hansler. Tune in for perspectives and discoveries about the changing world of business. It's time to connect to the heart, soul, and humor of how business gets done. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Biz-Souls. I'm Rona Lewis.
I'm Jeffrey Hansler, and we get to the heart and soul of business and the people that make it happen.
Today, we get a lesson in listening.
What?
Actually.
What'd you say?
Well, I was going to say, what you and I are masters at, Jeffrey, is the talent of ignoring. We ignore each other very well. Okay. So our guest today is Laura Janusik, right? Did I pronounce that right?
We'll go with that. It could be Janusik or Janusik.
Janusik, just Laura J. Yes. Laura is a results-driven communications/listening coach and trainer and a recognized worldwide expert in teaching and training listening. Her PhD in communication with a specialization in listening, as well as her MBA, allows her to see different ways to solve problems through both communication and process systems. She has a passion for developing people's strengths while improving their weaknesses by using the most current social, scientific, and brain research. She loves working with leaders and coaches who get their jobs done through asking questions and listening. So welcome, Laura. So it's like Dr. Laura, except Dr. Laura J.
Yes, I like to call myself the good Dr. Laura.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
There you go. That's funny.
Excellent.
So welcome. Jeffrey, ask your question.
Okay, I always get to ask the first question. So the question is, what did you want to be when you grew up? When you were little?
I so vividly remember my cousin had this game called Head of the Class. And I don't know if you remember that or not, but somebody had to be the teacher and everybody else were the students. I always had to be the teacher. I was just hooked at 5 years old at being the teacher. And so I've been the teacher my entire life, and I still get so excited. Now I don't get excited about being the teacher, but I get excited about helping the others learn.
Gotcha.
Outstanding.
Yeah. So tell us about your journey. I mean, to be a listening coach is such a niche thing. How'd you
Yeah, it is very niche-y and it's very accidental. So in a nutshell, my advisor for my master's program was a worldwide listening expert, told him I didn't want to have anything to do with it. My final semester, my 15 years of HR experience kicked in, and I realized I should show a little interest in his passion since he'd be writing my letters of recommendation. Took his listening course, 2 weeks, it just changed my world. I realized, I can't say I realized exactly what listening was then, and I'm not even sure I could tell you exactly what listening is now. But listening is so many things. Yeah. And I realized that I had been the world's worst listener. And so I was so hooked into listening, I decided to get my PhD and continue on and study and be a researcher in listening.
Wow. Well, you mentioned that listening skills are at their worst. Why do you think that is, and what's so bad about them?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the reasons they're so bad, there are a number of reasons, obviously, right? And I think we can all agree that the way technology has changed communication has definitely changed listening. I can't tell you how many students I had who were just afraid to make a phone call, because in the phone call, not only would they have to speak, but they would have to listen. Right. And they didn't trust that in themselves, so they would prefer to text or email. I think another reason is, I'm sure you're familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Sure.
How we always
talk about that all the time.
Yeah, how we always think we're better. And with listening, there was a great study that was done with managers. 70% of managers said that they were above average in listening, and all of their colleagues and direct reports were below average. So you don't even need to be a math major to know that that can't occur.
Right.
But I think listening is so tough because we know what we understand, and we just assume that we're perfect in understanding the intent of the speaker. So we don't respond. We just assume that we're perfect and everybody else is imperfect.
So, Laura, from a business standpoint, how do you crack through that bias? You know, because obviously they can't hire you because that would kill their confirmation bias that they're a good listener.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, Jeffrey, because the clients that I primarily get are the ones who've been told by their boss that they're a bad listener and they need to improve their listening or their job is on the line. But other clients that I have are just, they're solid communicators. They want to be better communicators. And they somehow have learned or recognized that listening can help them become better. And I think that's one thing that people don't understand is, I like this as a mathematical equation. Speaking plus listening equals communication. And when we talk about communication, oftentimes leaders use that as a synonym for speaking, and they forget the listening part. So I think it's a problem because, frankly, we're not trained in it. Nobody's. There are so few listening classes in the world, right? And so it's just something that we learn from our primary caregivers, and we assume we know what it means. Jeffrey, look at me when you listen to me, right? And did your mom say that to you when you were growing up? And so you automatically went, oh, so if I look at somebody, that means I'm listening.
That's a good point. And Jeffrey's what? Auditory?
Auditory.
Are you auditory? Yeah.
I'm visual. Versus visual.
Yeah.
When we first started working together, I would get so mad at him because he wouldn't look at me when we speak, and I assumed that he wasn't listening. I'm like, you're not hearing anything. It's like, I hear exactly. And then he would repeat verbatim, and he's like, I don't look at things. And at the same time, I had to train him a little bit for this, because when he speaks, he sometimes looks all over the room as opposed to at the camera. He's gotten much better at that. And it was a little bit of work for both of us, I think.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into it.
So what do you listen for? What do you listen, and what should people listen for when they're communicating with somebody?
Well, should is a funny word, right? And there isn't one thing that people should listen for, because one of the great pieces of research that's out there, and it's actually an instrument too, it's called the Echo Listening Profile, which measures what we listen to and what we listen for. And what we found through the research is there are 4 primary listening dominances. So Jeffrey, if I had to peg you, I would say that you are probably an analytical listener, which means that you listen for the facts and the details, and you probably have a good touch of reflective in you, which means that you're listening to everything to try to tie it to your past experience and your past knowledge to build upon it. So we've got analytical, we've got reflective. Rona, you would definitely be over on the connective side, because connective listeners really try to connect emotionally with other people. So they're listening for the people and the emotions. And then we've got the conceptual listener. And I would say that you have a touch of conceptual there too, Rona, because conceptual listeners listen for the possibilities of the future. So when you recognize that there are at minimum 4 different things that we could be listening to or for, you have to put that listening within the context of the conversation. What is our goal of this conversation? Are we trying to brainstorm all of the different guests that we're going to have on Biz-Souls for 2026? If so, you've got a lot of that conceptual going on. If we actually have to nail down the 24 podcasts that we're going to record in the next 2 months, this is where Jeffrey would be listening for those details and those dates and things like that. So you two are actually a perfect, couple in terms of listening, which is good because you've got all of your bases covered. But the quicker answer is it depends on what the goal of the conversation is.
Do you get into context of high context cultures versus low context, like Germans are low context, Japanese typically are high context? Does that affect their listening patterns?
Yes, it does. And it's very interesting on a number of different realms. One of them being the book that I'm currently writing is loosely titled How to Manage Conflict Within the Context of Midwest Nice, right? And we know that the Midwest is comprised of three primary cultures: Norwegians, Irish, and German. When they founded the Midwest, if you want to say founded, or went through and staked claim to the Midwest. And so the patterns here are the cultural patterns of those countries. So when you ask, high context, low context, yes, that is a part of it. And another part of it are the values that different cultures have about listening.
And any
Whereas Jews don't listen. Neither do Italians. They just talk over each other. We have no idea what anyone else says.
There's some research on that, Rona. Do you want to know that?
Yes, tell me.
Yeah. So this research was done in terms of interrupting. So Rona, you are a great interrupter. I mean, you interrupt a lot. And what they found in the research are the cultures that interrupt the most are, let me think a second, Italian, New York Jewish was in there, and there was one other that I can't come up with at the top of my head. But what was really interesting was the reason you interrupt is because those cultures value co-creating the story together.
Right.
And so you want to have everybody have input to the story that you're going to create.
It's the connection.
Exactly.
See, I just did that.
Yeah. Whereas other cultures, like the Asian culture, Jeffrey, that you had referenced, they generally can allow up to 8 seconds of silence between the speaker and then the responder. That is excruciating for Americans because Americans typically reply within a half a second, right? Wow. So in the Asian cultures, it's a sign of respect to say, I hear that you just said something. I want to show you that I'm thinking about it before I respond to it. So we just show respect in different ways.
That is fascinating.
So the social media, it's going nuts over all kinds of things. In terms of listening, is it hurting verbal communication because of what's going on in social media with the text, the flames, everything else that's going on?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. And I know that you would say absolutely as well. I call it kind of a self-broadcast platform. And so people have gotten so into having a place to say what they want to say, but they don't have to listen to anybody else. And so they have become, I don't want to say good speakers, but they've definitely become more prolific speakers, and listening has really reduced.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeffrey. Did you want to ask another question?
Well, it was, in terms of relationships and building business relationships and listening. So subordinate, a lot of times it's subordinate supervisor. So what can a supervisor do to help their listening? And then what can a subordinate do to help their listening dealing with the supervisor?
Yeah. And I love that question because that's a lot of what I do in the coaching and the training that I do. What most people don't realize is listening really is perceived and judged by how you respond. And again, listening being part of communication, listening is speaking plus, or excuse me, communication is speaking plus listening. We can't just listen to something like a robot and then walk away and not say anything, because then people assume that we're not listening. And that becomes really evident in management and direct reports. So a manager will give the report, I want you to do this, this, and that. And then the direct report believes that they understand it, so they go off and do it. But how often do they do it correctly, right? Because there were things that they never confirmed back. So I think the number one skill is what I like to call confirming. It's called a number of different things, but basically it's paraphrasing what they said and asking if you're right in a way that makes them understand. And by the way, that's the best way to get a micromanager off your back. Because if you can paraphrase back and get it right, then they don't have to worry about it. But if you don't ever do that, they're following you down the hall, they're asking how the project is going, they want to see things because they don't know. They don't know. So listening really is an action. It's how we respond to what we've listened to.
So it really is active listening in that sense.
I hesitate to say yes
to use that. You don't like that. How else would you phrase it?
Yeah. Well, here's the reason I don't like that term is because it comes out of the therapeutic listening.
Okay.
And so, we don't do therapy necessarily in business environments,
right?
Because the goal really is aligning. And yes, so active is a good word because there has to be an activeness on both sides involved to make sure that the listening is correct, because what we're trying to do is get the same picture in everybody's mind at the same time. So you're looking in the same direction, at the same goal, at the same target, at the same time. So everybody knows exactly where they're going. Hard to do with two people, even harder to do in a group meeting.
Sure. Yes. Jeffrey and I absolutely have that issue a lot. He always tells you never listen. Yes, I'm very good at ignoring you.
So when you're a specialist in something, as you advance and the more you learn about it, opposite of the Dunning-Kruger, the more you learn, the more you don't know. What's been one of your surprises as you delve into the caverns of listening?
Yeah. Well, for me personally, moving to the Midwest in 2004. So I moved from the East Coast culture, and I actually moved into the East Coast culture when I was about 20 years old. And so I like to say I became an adult on the East Coast. So I had all of my big girl jobs there. So you pick up those patterns of communication. So, being very direct, not worrying about hurting other people's feelings as much as getting the job done because we were all thinking the same things. And then I moved to the Midwest, and the Midwest is a totally different beast. And I think what I personally learned here is I am really bad at listening between the lines. If people don't directly say something, then I don't hear it and I don't dig for it in what they are saying. Now that has improved, but it is really hard to do. And oftentimes I will have to say, so Jeffrey, are you really saying this? Because this is what I got from what you said, and they think it's very clear, but it's not very clear. And so there's a high context assumption that goes on here, but because we don't have like the families just all of the time together like the Asian cultures do, we're not really high context.
Right. So where on the East Coast were you? Because it's all different.
I lived between Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. for a number of years.
And then where in the Midwest?
Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay, very good. Okay.
So I have a question about verbal versus nonverbal communication, because that is involved, that is listening in a sense, because the people often say what they really mean through nonverbal. How does that fit in with what you coach?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think there's a lot of evidence to support, and rightly so, that we believe the nonverbals over the verbals. So even if people say something, to appease us, but their body language tells us something else, we listen to the body language. So to become a better communicator, you got to make sure that your insides and your outsides are matching when you communicate.
If there was one thing that somebody could work on to improve their listening, just in general, in the business world, what would be the greatest recommendation you could, if you could only give them one thing?
In the business world and in all of the classes I've taught and all of the trainings I've done, I will always say, if you only take one thing out of this class, I want it to be the skill of confirming. I want you to actually paraphrase what the other person said and get them to say if you're right or wrong, because then you've created that alignment. And that's the skill that's also been the most researched in both healthcare and other places. Actually, FBI hostage negotiations, that's what they're looking for as well.
Explain that a little. Just how are they using it?
Yeah. So in healthcare, back in the 1980s, patients weren't satisfied with their physicians. So they kept turning over looking for a new physician. And one of the things that the researchers realized is that the physician never talked back to the patient and said, so Jeffrey, if I understand correctly, you came in here because of this, this, and that. Did I get that right? Right. When they trained physicians to do that, the rate of people staying with the physician skyrocketed, and the rate of trust skyrocketed there. Now, what's important to recognize is that is more of the detailed factual information, right? My arm hurts, my hip hurts, those types of things. In FBI negotiations, they went back and they looked at a bunch of the transcripts to try to figure out when things shifted as in the hostage taker said, okay, maybe I'll negotiate. And what they found was it wasn't until the hostage negotiator confirmed the emotions of the hostage taker that the hostage taker said, okay, maybe I'll negotiate. Because it's really about being seen, heard, and understood. And once they felt like they were understood, as goofy as we think about it, like, oh, Jeffrey, you had a really hard day. Your wife told you she wanted a divorce this morning, and the stock market crashed and you lost all of your money. And, all of that must have been a really hard day. No wonder you took hostages. I get that, right? I get that. Right. And so once they felt that compassion, then they were willing to negotiate.
God, great points on both. Great points on both.
And just so you know, Jeffrey's got about 4 hostages behind the camera because
exactly.
He's just not happy.
And they can't bring my mother into it because she's not here anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, this has been amazing, Laura. Thank you so much. When you get your book done and out, we'd love to have you on again to talk about it, because we could go on for a long time. And so thank you so much. This is like, it's a whole new world that I think a lot of people have to realize that they're just not as good as they think they are.
Yeah.
So,
and how do they get hold of you? Best way to get hold
next thing. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, probably. Okay. Yeah, the best way to get in touch with me is to link with me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way. And then you could also go to my website, listeningtochange.com, and send me a message from the website.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you, Laura. This was Dr. Laura, the good Dr. Laura. That is it for us for today. I'm Rona Lewis.
I'm Jeffrey Hansler.
Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe, click that little bell. We could use the numbers. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Biz-Souls podcast with your hosts, Rona Lewis and Jeffrey Hansler. Did you have fun? Subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Talk to you next week.